Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new Nancy Drew analysis video. Today's video is brought to you by the patrons over at Mystique Manor and by all the official Fellow Detective channel members. If you too would like to support the channel and gain access to exclusive features, check out patreon.com/wizardkitten to become a patron, or click join next to the subscribe button to become an official fellow detective. I've wanted to make this video for quite some time after it was suggested to me by several fellow detectives, and today is the day that I finally get around to it. Today we're going to be talking all about motive, one of the three key factors in determining the culprit in a mystery besides the opportunity and the means. This critical component plays an integral role in any mystery plot, and dropping the ball on the motive often means that the rest of the story will suffer in turn. Conversely, a creative and carefully considered motive can lead to some of the best stories, especially when one considers just how important the ending is to the success of an entire work. A motive is the culprit's reason for committing the crime. Motives are present in even the smallest of crimes and drive the actions of the culprit, but it's in the big and terrifying cases where motives become particularly compelling. What could drive someone to commit the most heinous of crimes, the most dastardly deeds? Murder, for example, or kidnapping a hostage. How can humans be pushed to such extremes? How far will they go to get what they want or to protect their own self-interest? These are the questions that must be answered when crafting an excellent motive. And thankfully, within my favorite mystery series, we have plenty of these. From this point on, I'd like to point out, perhaps obviously, that there is the potential for culprit and ending spoilers as well as major plot spoilers for any of the 33 Nancy Drew PC games going forward in this video. Culprits, endings, and motives will be discussed, and culprit images will be shown. You have been warned. With that out of the way, let's start speaking more specifically about motives within the context of the Nancy Drew PC game series. The series spans 33 separate mysteries, though several motive themes can be gleaned. The most common motive within the series, and perhaps in mystery as a genre, is money. 15 Nancy Drew mysteries, nearly half the series, involve a culprit whose primary motive is money, and sometimes, more specifically, treasure. In these mysteries, the culprit is either interested in becoming rich or protecting the wealth that they do have. Oftentimes, they have discovered the presence of something valuable, but it is hidden or otherwise out of reach, which is where Nancy and the mystery come in. Nancy usually needs to find the money and/or treasure before the culprit in order to also discover the identity of the culprit. Broadly, self-interest is the second most common culprit motive, found in 10 Nancy Drew mysteries. This often comes in the form of culprits protecting themselves in some way, like maintaining their reputation or power or criminal standing. This category also encompasses more specific motives that can't otherwise be categorized, like Jane Penvillin more or less poisoning Linda Penvillin because she's struggling to accept her new stepmother, or Joseph Hughes finding it impossible to let go of the Royal Palladium, the only home he's ever known. In these situations, the culprit is intimately tied to the motive, and Nancy usually discovers them simultaneously. Revenge is the next most common motive, showing up in at least 8 Nancy Drew games. In some cases, the culprits are directing their rage towards Nancy, seeking revenge for perceived wronging of the culprits by our heroine in the past. Think the likes of Brenda Carlton in Alibi in Ashes, or Johnny Roll in Ransom of the Seven Ships. However, culprits don't just seek revenge against Nancy, but against other suspects. Think Clara Thornton and her jealous rage towards Charlotte in Ghost of Thornton Hall. In these instances, the motive typically becomes clear through conversations with characters, the culprit or otherwise. As a less common motive, we have fame and/or power, which shows up in at least 6 Nancy Drew games. The culprits in these situations may also be interested in money, but money alone is not the driving factor. Instead, there is also some element of wanting to outdo others, gain power or influence, or become more impressive than they were before. As an example of this, we have Laurie Gerard in Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, whose motive for finding Jake Hurley's treasure was the fame and glory and good reputation that she believed would come from it. She didn't really care if there was any money in the deal, but she did care about publicity, about people thinking that she was brilliant and impressive. And the rarest motive of all, you ask? Well, accidental. In one Nancy Drew mystery, the responsible culprit did not appear to perpetrate their crime on purpose, or really even understand why what they were doing would be considered criminal. I'm referring, of course, to Fiona Malloy in The Haunting of Castle Malloy. Yes, Fiona technically kidnapped Matt, but there was no malicious intent, no seeking of fame, fortune, or influence, or even self-interest. Fiona was mostly confused and lonely when Matt fell into her lap, and the crime of her mystery was not purposeful. So, if we look at all of these trends of types of motives, can we draw any conclusions? Is it clear what kind of motives make for strong mysteries and which are more likely to end up weak? I've identified a handful of mysteries that I think did an excellent job with their motives, and a handful that I think were really quite poor. But I will first note that the type of motive doesn't seem to make a difference. By that I mean that a culprit seeking fortune is inherently no more or less interesting than a culprit seeking revenge, for example. It comes down to the individual writing of each particular mystery and whether or not certain elements become a part of the storytelling. To illustrate this, let's first discuss the mysteries that I believe have strong motives, and then the ones that I believe have weak motives. If you're a regular on this channel, you may be surprised by some of my conclusions. So, stay tuned. To me, good mystery motives in the Nancy Drew series all have the same 3 characteristics. 1, they attack the motive from a creative angle. For example, the culprit may simply be interested in treasure, but the way they go about planning and plotting is more unique than simply seeking for the treasure and distracting or frightening away other suspects, Scooby-Doo style. There's more to it than that. 2, players can feel the emotional impact of the culprit and their motive. By this I mean that the culprit is so invested in their motive that we can literally feel it jumping out of the screen, to the point where we can even sometimes empathize with their plight. And 3, the motive of the culprit is clear, identifiable, and is set up and able to be discovered through clues throughout the rest of the mystery. Exposition dumps of motives are not nearly as satisfying as motives that we could have pieced together all along, and that, on replays, we can see coming through cleverly placed evidence. And which games meet these 3 criteria? In no particular order, I think that Stay Tuned for Danger, The Final Scene, Legend of the Crystal Skull, Phantom of Venice, Warnings at Waverly Academy, Trail of the Twister, The Deadly Device, and Ghost of Thornton Hall have the strongest motives across the series. Dwayne Powers is seeking revenge in Stay Tuned for Danger after feeling spurned and outdone by Rick Arlen. The venom in his death threats is palpable, and the bitterness in his tone the only time that Nancy speaks with him personally is chilling. By the time we've discovered Dwayne's financial straits by poking around his office, we've pieced together his evil scheme. Clues riddle his depressing domain, revealing a man on the edge of reason. His motive is emotionally powerful, each death threat is unique in its design, and we have plenty of clues to piece together his maniacal puzzle. Joseph Hughes commits his crime out of pure self-interest. He thinks that kidnapping Brady Armstrong will stop the demolition of the Royal Palladium Theater, but when Maya walks in, he panics and kidnaps her instead. Joseph is practically dripping with desperation by the end of the mystery, a truly powerful emotional impact further reinforced by the trust that we build with Joseph throughout the case. Furthermore, his intentions are good and easy to empathize with, which lends a creative angle to his self-interest motive. Finally, the clues to his culpability were there from the beginning if we hadn't been blinded by trust, creating a truly fantastic motive and ending. Renee Amond seeks the legendary Crystal Skull, a fantastical treasure that would make anyone curious. What lends creativity to her motive is that her desire for the skull was clear all along, but her intention to murder Bruno Bollet was not. When this unfortunate mistake occurs, however, Renee accepts it quite willingly, which shows just how chillingly desperate for the skull she truly was. If her initial plan hadn't worked, who knows how far she would have gone to get the skull. We also have several clues indicating her guilt throughout the mystery, and her unhinged fanaticism for the skull is so clear by the end that just thinking of her upturned gaze sends chills up my spine. Helena Berg admires the work of Leo Macchiano so much that she decides to create a copycat gang of her own in order to heist Italy of some of its greatest treasures while barely lifting a finger herself. This is a creative take on what could have been a fairly mundane money and power motive. We end up admiring Helena's tenacity and passion for the art of crime that we almost can't help but be a little impressed by the end. Her eventual reveal as the culprit is set up nicely throughout the mystery, and the sheer cheek and jealousy that we get from Helena along the way sets up her reveal nicely for a solid emotional impact. Her nice girl act can only get her so far before it turns on a dime to cruel and menacing. Corinne Myers resents her fellow valedictorian candidates so much that she takes it upon herself to don the name the Black Cat in honor of her favorite writer, Edgar Allan Poe, and cause dangerous accidents to befall them. Her motive could be just simple revenge and power, but close-knittedness of the dorm environment coupled with the omnipresent air of high school drama lends a close-to-home kind of realism that makes us all wonder if we would ever do the same. The clues are certainly there before the ultimate reveal, and the twist of having another suspect do her dirty work is a fun surprise. The absolute scorn that she has by the end is menacing, and leads to one of my favorite culprit confrontations of all time. Scott Farnell could be the poster character for bitterness. Such is the intensity with which he rebels against Canute College and his own team for his own self-interest. The emotional impact of Scott's motive is set up marvelously. How he feels like a failure because of Ma's death, how he feels overlooked and disrespected by his college for refusing to grant him tenure, how he is completely and utterly jaded by a life of feeling all at once brilliant and inferior. Scott's rage really hits. The clues for his culprit reveal are definitely there, and his motive is uniquely set up because of how it was clearly built up so much over time, something that we can definitely see by the end. Victor Lawsett may just be seeking money by privatizing Nico's wireless energy research, but he's willing to murder for it, something that we've seen so rarely in the series that it becomes creative simply for existing as well as it does. I've always found Victor terrifying, with how quickly he flies off the handle and the rage and power behind his voice. It's really no wonder that he's a murderer. He's also incredibly smart, which makes him even more scary because of just how much of a threat it's clear he's become. His guilt is clear from the start for those who are looking. His anger and sheer power provide the perfect emotional hit, and his willingness to do whatever it takes in the pursuit of fortune makes him stand out from the crowd. Clara Thornton's initial crime is based in jealous revenge, her anger at Charlotte for being so well-liked, so perfect, so loved. What she didn't anticipate was how this crime and the following cover-up would have so many repercussions. But it's also clear that she was willing to do whatever it took to maintain her innocence, whether that be committing Harper or charging Wade. It's possible and perhaps even easy to empathize with Clara's motive because of how well her backstory is developed, making the emotions in the ultimate reveal quite pronounced. We're also easily able to piece together Clara's culpability with the given clues and conversations, and the closeness of the family drama lends a unique and powerful edge to her revenge motive. So, those are some of my favorite motives. While not all of the aforementioned mysteries are among my favorites in the series, I do believe that they all excel in developing unique, emotional, clear, and compelling motives for their culprits, each in their own powerful way. But not all mysteries in the Nancy Drew series do this. So which ones fall short? In no particular order, I think that The Silent Spy, The Shattered Medallion, Midnight in Salem, Labyrinth of Lies, Tomb of the Lost Queen, Ransom of the Seven Ships, and Creature of Kapu Cave have the worst motives in the series. Similar to the strengths, I see three main trends that appear to define what makes for a poor motive in the Nancy Drew games and likely across mysteries. 1. The motive is unclear. There are several mysteries in the series where it actually isn't obvious or even really explained why a culprit decided to commit their crime. That's a big problem. There needs to be a reason, however convoluted. 2. The motive is messy. There are several mysteries where the culprit appears to have multiple different motives that don't always mesh cohesively. It's easy for things to lose their impact if the intentions of the culprits are spread too thin. And 3, the motive isn't set up from the start, but rather appears suddenly through exposition at the very end of the mystery so that there would have been no way for detectives to discover it. This removes player autonomy and is, frankly, no fun. The Silent Spy is perhaps the biggest offender of these three sins. We have no legitimate reason to suspect Ewan any more than any of the other suspects within the game, and for good reason, because when his motive is ultimately revealed, Ewan explains that he teamed up with a terrorist organization, lured Nancy to Scotland, set up bombs, and all simply because he could. That's stupid. That's a stupid motive. Because I can is the world's laziest motive and does absolutely nothing to add to the emotion of the game. Ewan's motive is messy, unclear, vague, revealed at the very end, and frankly, just stupid. The Shattered Medallion is nearly just as bad. Curie is framed as the game's culprit, trapping Nancy and Sunny at the bottom of a cave and breaking George's leg because of Nancy's betrayal? Huh? What are you even talking about, Curie? The motive is ridiculously unclear because, first of all, Nancy didn't betray Curie, and second, even if it was all just for the cameras for the reality show, then say that. Explain that at some point. Good grief. The ending of The Shattered Medallion is a huge mess to begin with, but Curie as a culprit with her awful motive really takes the cake. In a close third, Midnight in Salem's culprit, Angry Lawyer Lady, has such a poorly written motive. One sec, I gotta look up her name. Oh yeah, Alicia Cole. Seriously, the characters in these games are so forgettable that I truly cannot remember their names half the time. Anyway, Angry Lawyer Lady, also known as Alicia Cole, is apparently peeved that the citizens of Salem aren't modernizing fast enough. They're stuck in their old ways and enjoying their history or something, which warrants burning down a historical manor, letting someone else take the fall, and then trying to sell it out from under the intended inheritor. It's unclear, it's silly, and it feels like it's trying to go for some sort of embittered, angry, emotional impact, but it falls completely flat. This is technically pieceable together to a certain extent, but not enough that it makes up for the complete and utter lack of emotional appeal or sense. The culprit in Labyrinth of Lies is everybody. Now listen, I know I'm a little bit of a Scrooge here. I get that this is creative and that they had to do it at some point. I understand all that. But I personally find mysteries in which everybody did it to be a bit of a cop-out. That notwithstanding, the motive is just messy, because everyone essentially has different motives. Xenia and Thanos want power, Grigor is working in his own self-interest, Niobe doesn't know what on earth happened. It's all just too much, and it isn't adequately explained. This is a huge problem with Labyrinth of Lies to begin with. It's really quite nonsensical, and this pours over into the motive as well. Abdullah Bakum in Tomb of the Lost Queen could have been a really cool culprit. He's incredibly arrogant and is prone to huge temper tantrums that make him extremely intimidating. Unfortunately, his motive and honestly even his objective by the end is totally unclear. If his goal is to make money off of the tomb, then he's missing out on a lot of opportunities. Same problem if his goal is to achieve power or influence. And then all of a sudden we have the issue where Jamila seems to know what's going on, but we never really do. We might have been able to guess that Abdullah was suspicious before the end, but by the end, the motive is still so messy and unclear that it doesn't really matter. The culprit in Ransom of the Seven Ships is Dwayne Powers? What? He's back? In disguise as Johnny Roll? Again, this may just be me being a Scrooge because I know a lot of people think it's really creative and exciting when past culprits return for revenge. Personally, I really don't like it, and in the case of Ransom of the Seven Ships, I hate it. Returning culprits are so tough to pull off because in order for them to work, detectives essentially need to have played the previous game. Otherwise, we're missing crucial context. This happened for me when I played Ransom of the Seven Ships before Stay Tuned for Danger. I was legitimately so confused, and honestly the confusion did not clear up even when I had played Stay Tuned for Danger, because new Dwayne looks nothing like old Dwayne, nor does he sound like him. He may as well be a completely different character. I wish he was. His revenge motive also rings hollow, because he rants about a lot of things that original Dwayne did not seem overly focused on. Once again, messy and unclear, and only maybe, potentially, possibly pieceable together if you've played Stay Tuned for Danger first. Even then, it's a stretch. Finally, Creature of Kapu Cave. This mystery is the perfect example for why exposition dumps at the very end simply do not work. Everything we learn about Mike and Pua Mapu's motivations, we learn in the last 10 minutes of the game. There's no way for detectives to learn about the motive beforehand, which is a huge bummer if you actually wanted to try and solve the mystery on your own. Their motive is also deeply unclear. A messy family inheritance situation, a convoluted plan to get it back, debts to loan sharks. There's so much going on, it's truly exhausting. So, what do we think? Personally, I think culprit motivations are fascinating. Humans impose rules and boundaries on our behavior as a way to survive as a species, and the social consequences for breaking those rules are usually quite intense. Even minor social infractions can result in drastic fallout and expulsion from the social fray. We're biologically programmed to be highly conscious about our social standing because, when it comes to survival, we need one another. So, what would drive someone to not only break some of the minor rules, but to break the absolute no-nos? To murder, steal, vandalize, kidnap, intimidate, and frighten? What sort of hurt or pain? What sort of adverse experiences? What sort of traits and temperaments lead to such behavior? And how does all of that play into a motive? If those sorts of questions can be asked and interpreted when it comes to a culprit's intentions, then I'm a happy detective, because that means that the writers truly thought through the human experience and tried to faithfully interpret it into something compelling. But what do you think, fellow detectives? What types of motives are your favorites? Which Nancy Drew games do you think have successful motives, and which ones do you think have poor motives? How crucial do you feel a strong motive is to the success of a mystery story? Let a Wizard Kitten know in the comments section down below. If you would like to come join a fantastic group of fellow detectives at Mystique Manor as a patron for the channel, gain access to exclusive content, and support the making of more content like this, please check out patreon.com/wizardkitten. I have also launched channel memberships with exclusive badges and emojis to use during streams and in the comment section. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming an official fellow detective, click join next to the subscribe button. Please feel free to follow the channel on Instagram or Discord, linked in the description box down below. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims 4 content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.